This special Mother's Day edition of Everyday Boss Bells is sponsored by Nescafe, Digicel, and Catherine Speak Spring Water. Nurturers, protectors, caregivers, supporters, mentors, our biggest cheerleaders. That's who moms are. Happy Mother's Day to all everyday Boss Bell moms out there. Today is your special day, and whether you are a biological mom, an adopted mom, or a mom by extension of being a part of the village that raises our children, this episode is dedicated to you.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Everyday Boss Bells. Today we're talking all things motherhood, and we're speaking with author, international speaker, and mother and wife, the beautiful and effervescent SallyAnn Gray. Welcome, SallyAnn. Thank you for joining me on set Everyday Boss Bells. You're looking absolutely gorgeous. Welcome.
You, Michelle. And you look beautiful as well. Love the orange on you.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about motherhood. How was that for you? Because I'm not yet a mom, and the way mothers talk about having children, you're a little bit like, it's a love-hate relationship. So tell me about your journey.
Well, I remember being around age 27, and I just had this overwhelming feeling like, I want to have children. I want to be married. I just started to have those feelings that every woman has, or most women have, as we close out our 20s and enter our 30s. And, I really wanted to have a baby so that I could, build my family and so on. So I met my husband, Mr. Mark, when I was 28, I believe. Yes. And I had Malachi at 29.
Oh, quick.
Yes,
quick and fast.
Yes, quick and fast. I had Malachi when I was 29 years old. So to answer the question, which would have been 10 years ago. So to answer the question about what has motherhood been like for me, I'm going to start with Malachi. I had a very rough pregnancy. So I had morning sickness, morning, noon, and night. I couldn't hold down anything, not even water, and I had to be hospitalized several times. So it was not easy physically on my body, and I had to be out of work at the time. I always joke and say that Malachi is a heart baby because I was working for the government at the time. I was a curriculum designer with Heart Trust. So I wrote curriculum for the government. So, I had to be asking for a lot of time off, but thankfully I had a very understanding boss at the time, and she would work it out. And even back then, we figured out a work from home situation where I could create curricula from home and submit it so that, it would facilitate this rough pregnancy. So I kind of, I went through some feelings of guilt because I felt like I had waited too long. I felt like
at 28, 29.
I thought that was the reason why my body was reacting this way. But it wasn't that. I would later find out that it was something hereditary because and we're going to get into it, but I've never met my biological mother, but I have met my biological father. And so some aunties on his side have had some issues, when they're pregnant, his sisters and so on, as it relates to physically carrying a baby. And so I kind of got some insight into possibly why I reacted that way.
That's an interesting point, though, SallyAnn. And we'll talk about that later on, because you are adopted and you don't know your biological mom, so genes and history of family. You wouldn't know certain things which would impact your health. Sometimes the future things that may come up and you can't really trace it. We'll talk more about that.
Right. So I ended up having my son via an emergency C-section. And, it took me a while to heal. But once he was here, I was elated, bundle of joy. He's the light of my world. And I just give God thanks for him because he's added a lot of meaning to my life. And now that I'm a mother, I cannot, not in a judgmental way towards my biological mother, but I could not imagine having to hand over my children to somebody, to a stranger. So I believe that my journey to motherhood has caused me to even empathize with my biological mother, because I recognize now how hard it possibly could have been for her to make the decision to hand me over. And then fast forward 5 years later, I got pregnant with my daughter, Sarah, who is a little firecracker. I'm telling you, she is the life of the party. Yes, she's the life of the party. And she's very festive. And the pregnancy was equally as festive.
Tell me about the festive part, because festive can be good or bad or a little bit in between.
I'm telling you, she's full of attitude, she's full of sass, but very smart. And actually, we recently added a new thing to the family where we've been in ads, TV advertisements.
Nice.
We're actually in a Sagicor ad last year, and she was the focus. Yes. So she festive in a very good way. But in terms of the pregnancy, I obviously would have had to have her by a C-section as well. But
is it that once you've had a C-section you can't? Typically. I have to learn these things.
Yes.
See, just in case, just in case. Coming soon.
But typically, there was a 10-week period in my pregnancy where I had to be monitored weekly by doctors, and I did every test under the sun because they believed that she had some type of blood disorder, and the whole conversation was I may have to do an intrauterine blood transfusion where they would insert a needle through my stomach, drain out her blood, and then give her new blood. And I prayed against that. I strongly believe in my Jesus, and it never happened because God said otherwise. And she's here now. She's healthy. I give God thanks for my 2 children. But the journey to having them physically was not easy for me. And I'm telling you, Michelle, Jesus has to come off of the cross to tell me go again.
Because you're done.
Yes. It's a wrap.
Well, 2 is a good number. 2 is a good number. I have a boy and a girl, so you're good.
You're good. It's a wrap.
So tell me now. So what are some of the highs and lows now after the physical part of motherhood? What we call the highs and the lows? What are the challenges and the peaks?
I'll start with the good stuff first. It's awesome to observe them. Look at them, especially in playtime. I observe them walking through the house, interacting together. I observe them interacting with their father and with their grandparents. And I'm saying, mighty God, I didn't know genes could be so strong, because Sarah is a replica of me and Malachi is a replica of Mark. And I kid you not.
Wow.
So it's just very fascinating. It's like an out-of-body experience, just watching these little humans walking around, and
you carried.
That's a carried, and they're like literally and so it's just a testament to the fact that children really live what they see, because they really replicate many of the things that Mark and I do. That would be a high. Another thing that has been really good for me to observe is the fact that my children are so God-fearing, and they pray a lot, and so when I observe them and listen to them praying, I sit back. It's the only time in my motherhood journey where I may sit back in the bed or stand up in the room while they're praying, and I'm not gonna tell no lie. I say, girl, you never do too bad. No, seriously,
you don't do too bad for sure.
You're not going too bad, just to hear my children, praying and giving God thanks. So just quickly, those are 2 things that come to mind in terms of the high. In terms of lows, I have to say, Michelle, that it's emotionally draining sometimes. So I wear several hats. So let me come back a little bit. I'm a wife, and I have to cater to the needs of my husband. And when I say the needs of my husband, I'm not just speaking to sexually, but my husband is an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. I have to be a supportive wife. So whatever Gray Focus Media needs, I have to ensure that I'm there to back up my husband and support him because he supports me. Listen, not even Brazil supportive like Mark, because let me tell you, that man have my back. And so I have to be there to make sure that I'm cooking for my husband. He eats differently from the rest of the household because he only eats fish. I don't even know what the category is now.
I think it's pescatarian.
Yeah. So, when me and the kids will want our oxtail and our mutton, that says the constant 2-pot if we're not in the mood for, fish, and I'm allergic to seafood. So it's just a constant that. So, that's the first thing, my commitment to my husband in the wife role. I have my children, I have my parents who are getting older, I have siblings, I have my friends and my friendships that I have to nurture. I have my own business, Global Speakers, and I'm a speaker and author in my own right. And on any given day, and I also do training consultancy out of my company for a lot of corporate entities throughout the LATAM region. On any given day, I may wear 7 hats. Wow. And so when the day comes to a close, right, at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, when I've come off the last Zoom meeting, and by the way, Michelle, I'm all zoomed out. I can't cross
We're all zoomed out.
No more. I'm over it. Zoom will love you. You've provided an awesome service to the world, but trust me, I can't cross it.
Yeah, it is a lot.
So when I finish all of that, I just want to take a warm bath and relax.
Yeah.
But here come the children now, because our last interaction would have been, if I'm not keeping Sarah throughout the day for homeschool, managing that. Sometimes we have somebody who comes to the house and sits with her specific for that, different from helper, because that's how I maintain my sanity. Yeah. I have to outsource help.
Outsourcing?
Yes, right? So if when all of that is said and done, after we do the whole morning routine, they don't see me again many times until 6:30, because I go into my office space in the house. Mark goes into his office space, and we're at work, and the kids are at school. So when they run into the room at 7:30, 8 o'clock, Mommy, and they have to tell me everything from hook, line, and sinker. What happened on the online class, Sarah? Tell you who come on our class in lipstick. And Mommy, can you believe it? And we're just 6. And can you believe that so-and-so didn't even have her mother sitting there with her?
Oh my God.
She just came on the call. And she go, duh, 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 duh. And then Malachi come and him have to give you the rundown of his class as well. And then, they want to spend that time.
Yeah.
The reading, we have to read, which is very important. So I love it, but I'm going to be upfront, because I am very authentic and I'm not going to pretend. It can become very emotionally exhausting sometimes to cater to their emotional needs towards the end of the day. When I just need a break to just go.
Exactly. And I don't have kids. I don't have a husband. And trust me, work alone knock the wind out of you. So I can understand. Girl, I don't envy you.
So, those are the highs and lows, but I wouldn't have it any other way, and I'm very grateful. So when I get into the space where I find myself complaining too much, I pull myself back and I say, Sal, everything that is happening in this house right now was once amongst the things you prayed for. Be grateful. Because I remember how I felt when I wanted kids. And I remember how I felt when I wanted a husband. And when my husband proposed to me, I planned and executed my wedding in 3 months. Wow. I did warm and like how dry peas want water. And I love this did not want to give him a chance to change his mind.
I love it. I think I'm going to try for a 1-week wedding. I think with COVID happening, I think I can pull off a 1 week when the person proposed.
This 1 year, 2 year engagement thing. And no disrespect to anybody. I mean, people make their own personal decision based on what suits their relationship. But me, I wanted to quick and
then the baby come a year later. I love it. I love it. That's how mine is gonna go. Just watch out. SallyAnn, that's so beautiful. And I totally understand what you mean in terms of the highs and the lows. As I said, I hear people talk about motherhood and it's usually kind of that balance. But we're going to talk a little bit about your childhood growing up, because we touched a lot on family, on your health during your pregnancy and not really knowing and finding out that it's related to your biological parents. How was childhood before you knew you were adopted? How was childhood?
It was great. It was great, Michelle. Like, I kid you not, if my parents didn't reveal to me that I was adopted, I would have carried along. Because if you're talking about care and attention, and just feeling a part of, they have done a great job at that. And I give God thanks for them every single day. Big up Marjorie and Selburn Sharp. Mommy and Daddy, you know I love you, because I'll send them this link when it comes out. But I had a great life. I would say in Jamaican terms, a typical middle class life. We didn't have everything, and I certainly knew I didn't live in Cherry Gardens or Norbrook, but I don't think that I wanted for anything that was a necessity, you know. And so I think that I had a pretty decent upbringing up to that time. I mean, I had a pretty decent upbringing all throughout, but it was just coming into the knowledge of the information caused me to act out.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I don't think adopted parents get enough credit, because it's and a recent story came out in the media that got me thinking, and which is why I actually reached out to you, because it's almost as if adopted parents are secondary. So if the biological parent comes around, it's almost as if they have the right to the child no matter what the circumstances. So I'm very happy to hear that you had a solid family who raised you well, but knowing the information at, I think you told me 13?
Between 11 and 13, bits and pieces were revealed.
How did that make you feel? Let's talk about the feeling of it.
Unworthy, unloved, unbalanced. I just felt like, why would my mother hand me over to a stranger on the side of the street though? That's very hard for an 11 or 12-year-old to comprehend, you know. And it's very easy for people to brush it off and be like, just be happy that people took care of you. But there is a psychological component to it. And so now I don't try to engage in the conversation with people. If you've never been adopted, I'm not even trying to hear your perspective, because it's just not something you'll be able to understand. I'm grateful, but I had to go through a process. And so I felt very unworthy, unloved, and I struggled with extremely low feelings of self-worth for a long time. By the time I came into the full knowledge of the adoption, I would have known past what we called back in the day common entrance, which is now PEP. And for the persons who are probably tuning in internationally,
right? It's from primary school. Your exam leaving primary school to get into high school
in Jamaica. So, by that time I had no graduated or left primary school, and I was now at St. Andrew High School for Girls, which is a school that I passed for. And the reason why I made mention of the whole Norbrook thing and whatever is because my parents are educators, so on a teacher's salary. They're really, I just knew, I think I stuck
you got
out like
what you needed.
Yeah, I was very clear about the fact that I was in high school with a lot of children who their parents were politicians and lawyers and doctors. So there was the whole Norbrook and Cherry Garden vibe, and I'm living in Queensboro, which is at the foot of Red Hills, which is pretty decent. But
at that time,
Michelle,
the comparison.
I did, and I'm not going hide and talk. I'm good now. But at the time, there were parts of me, in addition to the knowledge of the adoption, was starting to feel a little bit cute about the fact that I didn't measure up to a lot of the girls. And I think Andrews, in terms of the the children, the young ladies who attend the school now, it's way more diverse than it was back when I attended. I would say that it was a little bit more elite. If I could say that.
Yeah. I mean, there's some truth to that.
I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so my reality, I felt a little bit, I did feel away. I did feel away. Like guys, I feel away. I felt away.
But how did you, from that transition, because we're seeing you now and you're an accomplished woman, you wear many hats, and for those who know you and interact with you, would have a lot of good things to say about who you are. You're also an international speaker, so you've been on international platforms sharing your story. How did you move from what you termed a rebellious teenager to kind of figuring out, okay, this doesn't make sense. I need to get over it and I need to get focused?
Well, at age 15, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which is attention hyperactive disorder. And it's a special need. I was also prescribed with medication, and I was on that for some time. And, I went through high school, calmed down a little bit, made it to lower sixth form, did my CXCs, settled a bit, and then I started acting up again in lower sixth form. I was kicked out. When I was kicked out of high school,
Hold on, you have to back up a little, because I want to understand why you were kicked out. Because I hear you say it, but why were you kicked out?
Because I didn't follow school rules. I would sneak out the school, I'd crawl underneath the back gates at Andrews, that drop you on half a tree road and gone about my business. I climbed the fence, and Mrs. Reed was not about that life, okay?
Wow.
Which is was the principal at the time. So I had to go. Back talking teachers. It was those types of things.
That was
No, I was never it wasn't like fighting. It was more just rebellion.
Behavioral.
Yeah, man, behavioral. So I was asked to leave lower six, of course, because that would not have been setting a great example for the girls in lower school.
I can tell you some stories about me being in the white and blue at St. Catherine High School in sixth form, but this is not about me, so yeah.
So, but when I remember the day when my parents were called to the office and Mrs. Reed said, "Mr. and Mrs. Sharp, we believe Sally would benefit from a different environment because she knows how to fix it up nice." And I remember going home and my mother said to me, "Well, children who live in this house either work or go to school, and you've lost your spot in school.
Wow.
So you're going to have to figure out your life." And I remember that night, because you're talking about where the transformation started that night. So I grew up in a household with avid readers. So my parents as educators, naturally they read a lot, and we had a little library in the home. And that night I went and I sat in the little library area, and I saw actually a book kind of dangling. So it wasn't slid all the way in, it was just kind of out a little bit. I took up the book, and the title of that book was Gifted Hands by Ben Carson. And I read that book throughout that night. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was up all night and I read the book because I'm a reader. And in that book, oh my goodness, it was like God dropped it in my eye, in my path, so that I could see it that night. And I learned about Ben Carson's story of the fact that he too was considered an out-of-control teenager, and he almost killed a teenage boy when he was also a teenager. Wow. Because of all the rage he had due to the fact that his father left himself and his brother and his mother. So he was raised in a single farm home. And now he's this big doctor, head of neurology and some, pediatric neurology at Johns Hopkins University. And I'm looking at the transformation and the transition for him. And I'm like saying something in my head like, hey, if John, if this man can turn it around, I can turn it around, And, my mother got me a job Big up to Heart Trust NTA. I was a heart trainee and I worked at a financial institution here in Kingston, Jamaica for a year. While I worked at reforming my life, I went to counseling during that year as well.
Yes, counseling is very important.
To kind of deal with some of the anger that I had, as it relates to being adopted. And then that's where the turning started. And I recognized through the counseling that I actually wanted to become a teacher. I felt like it was my calling to go back into the classroom and help students, misunderstood students like myself, to kind of navigate their academic career. And so after about 6 months at this financial institution, my mother was lecturing at Michael at the time, and I approached my mother and I said, "Mommy, I want to become a teacher." And she said, "Really? Wow, all right." And she called whoever name at Michael and she said, "All right, we can go talk to so and so and so and so and so and so." And lucky for me, I had my CXC, right? Because I was kicked out of high school in lower 6. So at least I had the
At least
CXC.
you have up your subjects.
Yeah, man, I have my subjects and I had like 2 1s and 6 2s. So girl, not too bad. You know?
Not too bad.
Girl, not too bad. So now my mother got me into Michael and I chose special ed. There was this new thing on the scene, special education, teaching teachers how to help children who fall outside of the norm. And that is where my career in education began. I would say that was where the turning began for me. And so once I entered Michael, I started maturing. That 1 year of work and the counseling did a lot for me. And I matured a lot, not completely, but I had started the journey.
Are we really ever mature? Just saying.
Just saying.
It's a growth period all your life.
Yes, it's a journey. And so that was where, the turning began, and I completed Michael 3 years later, taught for a year, and guess what? I always share this in my story. After completing my diploma in special ed, guess what? Mrs. Reed employed me. So the school that kicks me out employed me. Yes, 3 years later as the first special ed teacher at St. Andrew High School for girls.
Look at that.
God is good. Yeah.
Look at that.
And
that's amazing though. That's amazing. Yeah. And for me, Sally, that speaks to the fact that your journey really is just that, because coming into the knowledge, knowing that you are adopted, and it taking that psychological effect on you, it's just something that, as you said, persons can't really understand unless they've been a part of it. But to me, it helped you. Yes. It probably helped you, because you wouldn't have been who you are now
without the story.
Without the story.
Yeah.
And to me, knowledge is power.
Yes.
And I think that gave you the power to realize that you can transform your life from rebelling to accepting, and then moving on. But tell me, how did your parents feel in the midst of this this I would guess say rebellious years?
My assumption would be is that they felt really bad. I don't think that they felt good about the fact that people were saying that their child was out of control. No parent would or could, and certainly now as an adult, I'll hear them bust out a laugh and they'll be like, "Picnic, you put you through hell enough." So I know that it was a struggle for them. But something, I remember overhearing a friend, my mother's friend, tell her one day in our house, my mother's friend came to look for her. They were in the kitchen, and I overheard her saying, "Margaret," because my middle name is Shelley. It's SallyAnn, ShellyAnn. Trust me, don't ask. So my family,
we're gonna ask.
We're gonna ask. So my family calls me Shelley, and I just remember overhearing my mother's friend saying, "Marjorie, why you not find her mother and give back Shelley? You're gonna make her mad you, you're gonna make her stress you." And I remember hearing my mother say, it was her mother's purpose to carry her. It's my purpose to raise her. And that stuck with me. That's the essence of my third book, Wayward Teen to Transform Queen.
That's
because
so
my
beautiful.
God, when a parent can see past what they're seeing in the physical realm, to know that it is my purpose to raise this child, it puts a different twist on things.
Getting a little bit of goosebumps.
Yeah,
that's
so to
beautiful.
God be every
though.
single glory, you know, and I know that it was a struggle for them, but what I can say is that they know without a shadow of a doubt that I was given to them by God to raise, and I could not be the person I am today without their influence in my life.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful, and big up to your parents.
Yes.
Well done. She's an amazing woman. So, and the transition from that is, what values did your parents pass on to you that you use in raising your little ones now?
Oh gosh. Unlimited love. Compromise. So one of the things is that my parents, we would have family meetings. I always remember having family meetings, and they would ask for my. So I was raised in the household with two older sisters, twins, which they are my adopted mother's nieces. And she took them from her younger sister. So my mother is the eldest of all her siblings, and her youngest sister had my sisters, Marsha and Michelle, when she was like about 15, 16 years old. But because my mother was the eldest, by the time she had them, my mother had already completed teachers college and was married. And you know, back in those days, so my mother took the girls from her little sister so that her little sister could finish school and live her life.
Your mom is so
and then
awesome.
she just kind of never, you know, my aunt just kind of never bothered come back for them because my mom was doing such a great job. But everybody knew what was, you know, the whole dynamic and stuff. So I was raised in the household with my mother's nieces as my sisters. So I refer to them as my sisters. So, you know, I remember us having family meetings and a lot of compromise, and my parents would talk to us. That's what I do with Malachi and Sarah a lot. I remember, I don't ever recall having a ga goo 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 kind of conversation with my kids.
Real talk.
No, like even from they wearing diapers. If Malachi pick, I'm like, son, seriously? Come on, no. You know, I've always had high-level conversations with my children. And so now, if you have a conversation with them now, you probably won't believe that you're speaking to a 10 and 5-year-old. So I have taken that, you know, understanding, love, compromise. I've transferred that, you know, allowing them to be free agents who are disciplined. Let me put that in context. My parents, I believe, balanced profession with purpose a lot. Like understanding that I needed to go to college and have a solid profession and be able to earn for myself, but knowing that there was something deeper. So I don't know, like the fact that my son, he loves planes. I mean, Malachi talk about the plane from morning till night. There are paper planes all over my house. And when I say paper plane, I don't mean the normal one where me and you can
look like it have engine.
I mean, it have like him start it out. And he goes on YouTube, and the man playing them turned. And he tells me, Mommy, I want to be an aeronautical engineer. So instead now of me saying, oh, what kind of foolishness, and Malachi, I can't take for hear that about playing every minute and whatever, which is what a lot of parents would do. I've taken that from my parents to say, you know what? I'm not going to downplay the things that
dreams
they love
and aspirations
and their passions, you know. I'm gonna just allow them to be. And him come in your ears with the recorder, and him a play One Love, One Heart, and it's so commendable. But may I tell you the truth, Michelle, sometimes I can't take the noise in my ears. But I just want to tell him go one side with the noise. But I am reminded that my parents always encouraged the things that we loved. I remember as a child winning an art competition at Edna Manley. Because I'm an artistic child, there's a side of me that is semi-artistic, semi-creative. And my parents enrolled me in summer school at Edna Manley. And I did a painting that won an award. And so I've taken a lot of good great lessons from how my parents raised myself and my two sisters in the household. And I've transferred it to my parenting along with my husband to parent our children. I personally think that it's working well.
I think so too.
So myself.
I think so too.
I think we have a lot of areas that we can improve on. We're not perfect parents by any stretch of the imagination, but I really don't believe that we're doing too badly.
Great, great stuff. I'm sure your little ones are doing just perfect, and you and your husband are raising a king and a queen to pursue their passions just like their mom and dad. And I think it's so important, I think, to underscore the fact that you could have gone a different direction when you found out about being adopted, because a lot of times we use the negative or perceived negatives, because sometimes it's a perception of not knowing or not feeling belong because your biological parent gave you away. What would you say to parents who have adopted children and maybe going through that rough stage of the child that they adopted, kind of rebelling and feeling unwanted? What would your advice be to those parents now?
I would say acknowledge the fact that there may be an issue, that there may be some imbalance in their psyche, their spirit, and what they're carrying in terms of the burden. Acknowledge it. Number one, right? Don't brush it under the carpet and be like, oh, she's going to be all right. I'm going to be all right. I'm going to grow it out. Well, some kids may grow it out and others might not. Yeah. Okay, so we need to have family meetings and talk through what the feelings are. And when we identify them, should we recognize that within the family dynamic, we're incapable. And I'm speaking specifically to the parents and the village, whoever your village is, auntie and all of that. When we recognize that we're out of our depth, let us seek the professional help and get the services for our children that they need, so that the professional can help them walk through that space. Trauma, adoption trauma is a thing. It is a thing. And many children tend to want in their lifetime adopted children will go through some trauma, even if it is the trauma of wanting to, not having an issue with the adoption, but the burden of feeling guilty when they get to a certain age, that they were raised by such awesome parents, but now I actually want to get in touch with my biological roots. And sometimes that can burden the child. It burdened me a little bit, and I have spoken with other persons who were adopted who, just kind of sure that they didn't want to let down their adoptive parents. They thought they did such a good job for them, with them and stuff like that. So I would say, let's talk it out. Let's acknowledge what the feelings are and what the issues are. Let us consult with the village. And if we put together an action plan and the action plan now work, let us get the professional help that is needed so we can, move through things quicker and get to our resolve, faster. And help the child to get to a place where they can come into some semblance of acceptance. And pull their lives together so that they can move forward and walk in purpose and do what they need to do.
And do great things. You can do great things no matter what your circumstances. And reversely, what would be your advice? Know that you're where you are, looking back at what advice would you give yourself then to go through the motions, probably a little bit better, handle it differently? So what advice would you give to children who are feeling that way now?
The advice I would give to children who are adopted now, or to my younger self, is the world is not against you. And I think there was a part of me felt like, gosh, you know what I'm saying?
You're like, why me?
Why me? I would ask them to be open to the mindset that this is actually God at work to move your purpose forward. You mentioned it earlier that without my story to stand on now, I possibly would not be where I am today as a professional speaker, because it is my story that has caused me to be able to connect deeply with audiences, even before I share my expertise, mindset expert and all of that. Sometimes people just kind of really over it, they just want to hear something authentic. Motivational speakers come dime a dozen, and people just want to connect deeply and know that the person on the stage is a human being. They feel like I do, and so on. So I would just encourage that child, to understand that God is holding the pen and He's writing your story. And quite likely, it is the premise upon which you will be able to build your empire later on in life. So allow yourself grace and be open to what God is doing. Because at the time, somebody had told me that I would be who I am now, I'd just be like, lies.
How, where, and when.
Yes, so be open to the fact that God has the pen in His hand and He's writing the story, and whether it's profession, whether it's purpose, whatever it is that you are poised to do later on in life. And everybody won't be a speaker and author, but whatever you have been called to do in your vocation, that your story, your unique story, is going to be what propels you into greatness. And so just walk in it and allow yourself grace.
That's so beautiful. So children, boys, girls, adults, because I know even as adults, we still feel that level of belonging and wanting to be a part of something. And I think it's truly important that no matter what our circumstances is, to find what is unique to us, find what makes us truly live and feel alive, and just walk in that. And finally, we're just going to wrap by asking Sally to share her 5 tips for what an everyday Boss Bell mom needs. So special day, today is Mother's Day, May 9th, and we want to talk about moms. So share your 5 tips for being an awesome everyday Boss Bell mom.
Everyday Boss Bell mom. Tip number 1, love unconditionally and learn to forgive your children. So love unconditionally, learn to forgive your children. And guess what? Be okay enough. Let us bring our egos down and be okay enough to apologize to our children. That has worked wonders for me. Sometimes I shout at Malachi or Sarah. Sometimes I accuse them of doing something in the house. And Malachi comes and says, Mommy, it wasn't me. And you don't believe me. And I am humble enough to go to my 10-year-old child and say, son, Mommy got it wrong. I am sorry. I came at you a little bit harsh, not true. And see me here with the tears in him. Yes, Mommy, And so I want to encourage the parents to be loving, to be understanding, to apologize to your children, to compromise with your children. Michelle, let me pause here to say, mothers, and I am included, sometimes we forget that our children are human beings. We forget that they're people. They're little, but they're people. They're little people with their own emotions, with their own feelings. And sometimes I think out of frustration, I don't think we genuinely intend to harm our children. We forget that they're little people. And so, think about the relationship as how would I talk to my girlfriend like this? Would I talk to my brethren like this? Would I even talk to my husband like this?
Would you talk to yourself like this?
Would you talk to yourself
or would you
like
want
this?
somebody to talk to you
like that? So let us not rough them so much. Discipline, I'm a stickler for discipline. But can we bring it down a little bit and remember that they're human beings and they feel and they hurt? And sometimes Sarah will come and she'll rub my face and she said, Mommy, when he shouted at me at the dinner table, I didn't feel good. I'm sad. Oh gosh, what I have to do now, Michelle?
You have to go hug her up and kiss her
and
up.
I said, Sarah, Mommy is so sorry for shouting at you. Do you forgive me? all right, mommy, and she kissed me and gone.
That's beautiful.
You know, and so I think what it does, it humanizes parenting, it humanizes mothers, and I think as our children grow older, they'll appreciate us for it. So I don't know if I reached 5 yet.
Yeah, Sally gave me a whole list. I promise you, we have much more than 5, but those are some awesome tips, and I will take them and I will lodge them at the front here. So when I am a mommy, I'll have it right. So.
And I have a last tip that I want to share with parents. Let us get good at balancing profession with purpose. For the mothers out there who have teenage children, especially, I wrote a book, Wayward Teen to Transform Queen, Strategies to Help Your Teenager Succeed. And it's an 8-step guide.
I needed that back in the day.
And in it, I'm like encouraging parents to cultivate the mindset that, you know, your child can be a doctor who is passionate about singing and they can sing in a live band that night. It's okay. We don't have to tell them, we are going to this music, foolishness, and everything them do foolishness because it doesn't fit into what you thought or you believe they need to do to be successful. And especially now today, Michelle, in today's world, we have so many new and emerging sectors coming on stream and jobs. There's
people making money some ways that we couldn't fathom. Like even 5 years ago, we couldn't even think about it.
Yeah, so let us be open. Let us be open to our children and give them a chance. If they come to you with a degree that sounds so out of the box or a course that is in a creative field that they think they can do, you know, I was a curriculum designer at Heart Trust. And we have the German automotive school, Jaggers, right? And I'm telling you, some of those young men who did that, the mechanic course, they're in Canada now and they're making way more money than me with them level 2 certification who have big old masters, and they're making good money. Yeah. So I encourage you parents, you know, let us balance profession with purpose and be open to the new things that our children are introducing to us. And I'll allow them, give them a chance, bargain with them, say, I'm going to support you for 6 months, show me what you have with this thing. But after that, we're going to come back to my plan. Let's get the degree going. If it's even to compromise with them, but show them that you're supporting them. Give them an opportunity, because they'll step outside of the home for the support and they may fall into the arms of the wrong person who may influence them down a negative path. So let them find the support and the love at home. Right. That's it from me.
That's a great note for us to end. But of course, on Everyday Boss Bells, we're all about celebrating our women. So we cannot finish the segment without raising a toast to my guest. And of course, I'll just make a note here. We're drinking mimosa without the champagne. So if you know what's in a mimosa without the champagne, you know what we're drinking, because my host doesn't drink alcohol.
Yeah, I can't.
But SallyAnn, oh my God, thank you so much for talking with me. It was absolutely amazing. And we're going to raise a toast to mothers, motherhood, and the beautiful journey.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Ooh, this orange juice is delicious.
This special Mother's Day edition of Everyday Boss Bells was brought to you by Nescafe, Digicel, and Catherine Speak Spring Water.